Redditors on the autism spectrum, what is something you want non-autistic people to know or understand? People who are high-functioning or don't look act autistic are still having a hard time. A lot of us do this thing called masking, where we basically act as if we are neurotypical based off of the stuff we learn from others, and it is very exhausting to keep up that fake persona. It's not that I want to come off some way, angry or sad or whatever. It just doesn't come out right a lot of the time. It's like being tone deaf and trying to sing a song you know. You hear it, you know what song it is, but you try to sing it, and it's just incomprehensible. Sometimes it's like that for autistic people. Also, I'm not staring. I'm actually completely dissociating from my vision. I'm not looking at you, or that thing, or anything. That's just where my eyes happen to be pointing when I went inside. Edit. I also dissociate from my vision whenever I am actively listening. It wasn't until I was 19 that someone pointed out that I was always staring at their tits whenever I was talking with them. No, lady, your tits are just down and out of the way, where my face is always pointed. But nowadays I usually have the presence of mind to add off to the left to my down and out of the way. You know those people on the internet who get offended for seemingly no reason you're aware of? Imagine if almost everyone was like that. That is what having autism is like. I haven't been diagnosed as in the spectrum, but my younger brother is very far up the spectrum. I think everyone needs to know Autism Speaks is a god-awful charity that does not care about anyone with autism. It takes my mind a bit to recalibrate itself. I'm not a child. Don't talk down to me. First of all, apologies for ever being annoying. Second, we don't always want help, even if we look like we really need it. For me, I've had someone helping me all of my childhood, whether I liked it or not. It made me feel inadequate and helpless. Now as an adult I have a lot of trouble asking for help because I have that 3-year-old mentality of I can do it all by myself. Wait a while or until I do something dangerous before offering assistance, I'll feel less useless that way. Edit. Grammar. There are so many points I could make, but one of the most important for me is that description of autism symptoms are skewed. Autism for so long has been defined by people who don't have it themselves: parents, educators, psychologists. It's described in external terms: difficulty with social skills, emotional regulation, awkwardness. In other words, how it affects everyone around them. Autism for me is a very internal experience. Thinking with a brain that is very different, senses constantly overwhelmed, feeling lost in a world you don't understand. I get that interacting with us can sometimes be difficult, but think about how it feels to be someone who has those difficulties. I didn't ask for that. Being autistic for me has meant so many of things people take for granted, I knew I would probably never do or have. Children, spouses, sex, 9-to-5 jobs, friend groups, going out to the bar, standard interests. Not only that, but for all my daily social interactions, I have scripts. I rehearse scenarios and think beforehand of everything I will say. The idea that people will decide to do spur-of-the-moment activities or conversations is foreign to me. Almost all the decisions I make have been thought through beforehand, considering cost-benefit. I know that sounds exhausting. It is. But if I didn't make decisions this way, the consequences would be much more dire. They have been dire. Now most of these activities don't interest me anyway, but it does leave me wondering what I'm missing. I do often feel lonely and isolated from the rest of society. Having autism isn't devastating, but I still feel like I haven't learned how to manage it. I'm not looking away from you to be rude, eye contact just feels super weird. It drives me crazy when people share a picture of their autistic brother or a super cute autistic kid, as if that is their one defining characteristic. It's not a news story that someone with autism has a job or competes in a competition. Holy shit, we are people. Hi. My name is Dylan, and when I was 17, a very nice lady who my parents paid a lot of money to explain why I wasn't doing as well in school told them, in a tangent, that I had high-functioning Asperger's. This is not why I wasn't doing well in school, but it was the first time my parents had even considered the notion of one of their children being autistic. My childhood, unbeknownst to me, was something of a social trial by fire. I interacted with the autistic kids, and I wasn't put into speech because I appeared to be if a bit hyper-focused and misplaced typical growing boy. As a result, I taught myself a lot of the habits or mechanisms you see here, without knowing that I was doing all of this in part due to the fact that I operate a little bit differently than other folks. Currently, the most upvoted comment on this thread is by UJAKOBEBEEF98, who brings up the fantastic and often underlooked masking mechanism, wherein high-functioning individuals adapt and learn how to appear neurotypical from watching others interact, or even sometimes finding an individual they admire and attempting to repeat their personal formula for success. This is something I got incredibly good at due to my late diagnosis. But there was a downside. There's a lot of things that a lot of people are unable to mask. A big issue which is typical among high-functioning folks is that they develop a case of imposter syndrome and thus find difficulty forming long-term, meaningful relationships. Some folks, regardless of how good at masking they are noise sensitive, form headaches easily, or get irritated in social settings. It can also be very difficult forming a good sense of introspection, and often confusion is a hallmark of any emotional swing. These seemingly small quirks, over time, can cause stress on friendships, especially if the other individual is either misinformed about what autism is or believes the subject to be neurotypical. If you notice these sorts of behaviors in a friend or colleague, perhaps try to be a bit understanding about the whole thing. Not condescending, but understanding. Very commonly, you'll also find individuals who hyperfixate. These are also known as special interests. Commonly, Legos, trains, dinosaurs, space, rocketry, circuitry, engineering, Minecraft, the list goes on. They tend to collect a lot of information on their interest and spend a lot of time studying and enjoying it. This, however, by no means makes them geniuses. I often see a stereotype in media portraying people on the spectrum as math geniuses or as if they sacrificed social skills for skills in their special interest, but this isn't true. By all means, a special interest can be directly translated to passion. The kids you know who obsess over remembering models of World War I aircraft or the serial numbers of sirens, yes, this one is real, and I've met someone with it, put just as much work into memorizing those facts as you would. To give perhaps a clearer example, I like to say my special interest is astronomy. To make my work easier, I taught myself a bit of calculus in high school to help me understand concepts a little easier. I was, however, in the lowest class for mathematics, and because I couldn't understand the source material, I had a hard time with geometry and nearly failed statistics. But because it fuels my passion, I continue pursuing astronomy, and in January I am moving from Connecticut to Hawaii to pursue a PhD. Finally, it is commonly known that the autistic brain has a slightly different method of processing information. Truly sympathizing with that seems difficult to folks who aren't on the spectrum and leads to misinformation. What you really need is to practice empathy and remember that just because someone thinks differently than you doesn't mean that they're different from you. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. We aren't Rain Man. I always feel like an alien from a different planet when talking to people. Please try your best to help me understand things. I love learning. I have recently been told I am somewhere on the autism spectrum. I am almost 22. You wouldn't think I was, but I am. I don't understand emotions. Sad? Angry? Happy? It is all over my head. You must tell me how you feel, otherwise I'm none the wiser. I may not look autistic, but I am. Also, how does one look autistic? Please respect that I don't like to be touched. Don't try to manhandle me. Women on the spectrum exist. Many are diagnosed late or not at all due to their symptoms being less obvious or fronting less often. Please don't be nervous to ask me questions about my autism. If I tell you that I have it, it actually probably means I want to talk about it. I love talking about it. And also, there are no stupid questions. I appreciate you trying to learn. What's stupid is if you ask a question, I give you an answer, and then you tell me I'm wrong. Be open, be interested, and I will talk for hours. Conversations for me are extremely artificial. The way I talk is how I think normal is. Small talk is almost always completely pointless and annoying to me. It's a spectrum. High-functioning people, like myself, can hide it really well. However, we still struggle with a lot of things. I don't have any friends, but no one particularly dislikes me either. I feel like this is due to some rules I follow. Be hygienic, be polite, and have a plan to smile and dress normally in public. I can't speak for the low-functioning end, though. If I'm being inconsiderate or hurtful in my speech, I really don't mean to be. I can't easily form a sentence and make my mouth say it in time to keep up with the conversation, and I make mistakes in this process. It's not just a spectrum. It's like being a culture of one and being unable to adapt. That autistic children grow up into autistic adults, and that in many cases those autistic adults are going to need help and support from others for their entire lives, even the high-functioning ones. Still fighting with the state to get supports. So far it's been a 4-year fight with very little progress made. Most of the autistic folks I've met are honest to a fault and don't do well with subtle conversational hints. Please just be open and honest with us. I actually got caught up in a brutally hostile work environment because someone refused to do this, and I'm still dealing with the fallout from that situation today. Not all of us are good at maths. No, really, I don't get what you mean, and I do need it explained in clear, non-sarcastic terms. That we don't have a disease and their precious little angels can't catch it from being near us. Also that Autism Speaks is like the PETA of autism groups. I can only say this about myself. I often take things seriously when people say something to me. I can tell when people are joking, but if people criticize me in a joking way, I might take it seriously, like joking about the way I speak, or if I pronounced a word wrong. I don't want people to tread on eggshells around me, but if people joke about one of my traits, as opposed to joking about a trait that I evidently do not have, I'll get embarrassed and start questioning myself. My senses are all out of whack sometimes. For example, I only wear 1 or 2 kinds of pants because of texture hypersensitivity. Also, I low-key have an eating disorder because of smelling hypersensitivity. It sure is fun to explain why you're eating chicken, but any other meat is just plain unappetizing. For me it's a superpower. I'm able to focus on a few topics, and I feel strongly about those topics. While I'm strong in these topics, some are non-existent or neglected. I'd say it is easy for me to become addicted because of this. It makes me a great student in some fields more than others. I majored in speech communication to help me with this, and it's helped quite well. I know my fears are irrational. I cannot get over them. I'm fucking trying. Just because you want to be friends doesn't mean that's something I can actually do. Not every autistic person speaks in an emotionless or robotic voice. I'm level 1 on the spectrum, basically Asperger's, but unless I'm really upset, I speak like any other neurotypical person. I know this is a bit random, but it upsets me when people are so against vaccinations because they're afraid of their child getting autism. Bother the fucking hell out of me. They make it seem like it's better to have a child with some flesh-eating disease or something than autism. I had a friend who was autistic, and although it was hard to understand his reactions to things and work with him at times, I would much rather have a friend or child with autism than some horrific disease. The people that are afraid of vaccinations just enabled to stigma surrounding autism. I suffer from major depression disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and borderline personality disorder. I can tell you, I've been through hell and back. So have my parents watching me suffer. Nothing is worse though, in my opinion, would having my parents watch me die from a disease that could be easily cured in the first world with a vaccine. There are too many stigmas surrounding these sort of psychiatry disorders, and it makes me sick to my stomach knowing that people out there are so scared of them. Yes, they're scary, but I think I got lucky because at least I'm 2019. I can seek therapy and medication for it. Stop trying to be our friend. We don't want to be your token special needs friend, that one person you include in your social life so you can feel good about how inclusive you are. Stop it. We can sniff you out 100 miles away and we know when we're being patronized. If someone is blind or deaf, it's obvious. So people accommodate them. They get special consideration in all aspects of daily life. When I was in high school, I looked normal. I wasn't. But because I looked normal, no one cut me any slack. I was measured by the same metric used to measure everyone else. And because I didn't measure up, I was tormented. It's 30 years later. And I've mostly beaten it. People who meet me would never know. It still gives me trouble from time to time. But I now have a complete set of coping mechanisms that help me at work, with my wife, with my kids, and even with various environments out in public. But it was a long and difficult process, mostly built on trial and error. My kids who are affected, I taught them these things, and they're way ahead of where I was at their age. If you live with someone who is autistic, know that most likely, their facial expressions don't match their emotions. If they tell you they're not angry, but they look angry, go by what they say, not by how they look. Also, how would you feel is very difficult for them. But they don't know it. There's a very good chance that they're mostly incapable of knowing how you or they would feel in a situation without actually experiencing it. And by then it's too late. So talk about it beforehand. Tell them how you would feel or how they would feel if they did or didn't do something. If you're the autistic one, know that your perceptions of social situations are always distorted and may even be wildly wrong. Get the help of someone close to you who you trust and talk about social situations and facial expressions with that person every chance you get. Assume they're right and you're wrong. They may be wrong sometimes. But they're far more likely to be right than you are. You may also discover that your life will be more successful if you make decisions based purely on logic while ignoring what you feel. Many times I went against what I felt like doing because I knew I would regret it later. And this always turned out to be a good decision. Not autistic, but I work with kids who are. One of the main things that infuriate me is a lot of people feel that autistic kids or autistic people, in general, don't have a mind of their own. Some example of this is a kid I work with. I'll call him Tom. Tom is very creative, smart and a great talker, but he has difficulty connecting certain words together, like the wires are there, but he has difficulty connecting them to the right one, so people look down on him for that, and honestly makes me so angry. I wish people knew how hard it is to live in a world that's not meant for you. I know that I'm quirky and weird and odd, but that's only because I honest to God don't understand why people do things. Why do I have to compliment your haircut if you get one? My go to it, do you want me to compliment you or validate your choice? I don't understand traditions and why it's weird to not do them. I don't understand societal norms. Not understanding these things, but having to fake it in order to provide comfort to others is tiring. I try so hard to make other people comfortable and still get called eclectic. When I'm my true self, I'm called either an asshole or weird. I'm short, I'm not weird or trying to be an asshole, but rather I'm trying to understand a world that I've never been able to understand. It's not something to be cured, nor is it something you just get over. I'm sorry for being annoying and loud, I can't help it. It's hard for us to pick up on social cues even with all the help we may receive. So please make it clear what you really want them to know when talking to them. And maybe make an effort to talk to the person who isn't talking. They might not know what to say to make conversation.